All right, we're getting to the end of our unit on animals, animal systems, how you in general work, how we work, because I guess I'm an animal too. We're going to go over today the nervous system and the special senses, basically how you perceive the world. Last time we covered broadly everything else, but I'm devoting the bulk of today's lecture. So we've covered the endocrine system in the whole lecture on coordinating response in the body. We've covered in the last set of lectures, we covered the digestive system, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, the excretory system, the respiratory system. The circulatory system, thank you. So we've covered a whole bunch. Really, what we haven't covered in depth is the reproductive system, nor have we covered the integumentary system. So basically the skin, the hair, and things like that. Today, though, we're really getting into the nervous system, how you interact with and perceive the world. Everything that makes you is processed by nerve cells. It controls everything from the physiological to the psychological. It's kind of weird when you think about that sort of like you. And this is almost metaphysical philosophy, right? If you were to think to yourself, do you like imagine it in your own voice? You guys ever done that before? Like if you think about thinking, it's like your voice talking in your head, but then when you listen to try and figure out if that voice is actually your voice, it's not there. It's kind of weird. Your brain is odd and is basically making things up as it goes along. We're going to get into what makes you by talking first about the individual subcomponents of the nervous system and then how they begin to interact. I will be dead honest. Nobody knows what makes consciousness. If they tell you they do, they're lying. Psychologists haven't figured it out. What are they called? Psychology. There's neurologists, but there's psychology. Psychiatrists haven't figured out. Nobody who studies the brain, either biologically or experientially, has figured out what makes consciousness. So we'll give it a running start, and I'm not expecting you guys to figure it out either. Like right now. Later, yeah, maybe you'll figure it out, but not today. So the nervous system, we're going to talk about the anatomy of the nervous system, how it's organized, how it communicates internally, and how it's able to repair itself. As far as organization goes, there's a few things that are going to happen anytime you're interacting with your environment. You get some sort of sensory input. That is, something comes in from the environment, interacts with your body, your nerves maybe, and causes some reaction. That sensory input is then changed into either a chemical or an electrical response in your body. That's called integration. Then, from there, that sensory input that's been changed into a chemical or an electrical signal is then going to lead to some sort of motor output. That is, something happens, some reaction occurs. Then, once you have that motor output, that leads to an entirely new sensory input. That leads to more integration, that leads to more motor output. Just think about picking up your pencil. That requires a lot of steps. It could require vision. You see where here, check this out. Pencil on the table. I see the pencil, sensory input. I'm perceiving it now with integration. My motor output is I'm moving my hand. I'm actually seeing, one, I'm seeing where my hand is going. Two, I'm experiencing where my hand is going in 3 dimensions based on an entirely different set of nerves. I'm feeling the pencil, set of nerves, sensory input that's being integrated to tell me, am I putting enough pressure on it to pick it up? Then I'm picking it up and moving it, and I'm using my eyes to figure out where it's going. There's all sorts of this cycle continuing over and over and over again. Your brain is constantly, to put it in computer terms, you're refreshing all the time. It's almost like a series of snapshots of the world that you are processing so quickly, it seems like it's seamless. As far as the anatomy of the nervous system goes, there are two broad components. There's the central nervous system, or the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. The central nervous system is basically your brain and your spinal cord. For simpler organisms, it's that big, broad nerve net. Leeches and you don't have terribly much in common, but you do have basically the same, basically long cord with nerve ganglion at the top. You're a bit more complex than a leech. Branching off of that spinal cord, you have additional nerves, and those additional nerves that come off your spinal cord are going to make up your peripheral nervous system. So central, brain, spinal cord, peripheral, all the nerves that attach to your spinal cord. So far, so good? Questions or concerns? All right, so we're going to go into all of the different types of cells that may be involved in your central nervous system and your peripheral. Yes?
I changed my mind. I do have a question.
Oh, please. What's the question?
So for the organization, what does integration mean?
Integration is basically where you're converting the that physical signal coming in from the world into an electrical signal or a chemical signal that's being processed by your brain.
It's like processing raw data.
It's processing raw data.
Gotcha.
It's going to be based on where it's happening in the body. So an electrical signal is going to be sent from, say, the eye, or it's going to be sent from the ear. But it's only going to happen after another series of changes. Basically, it's dependent on which sense you're using. And we're going to get into the different senses and which ways they use it. So the central nervous system is made up of what are called neurons, which get their own lecture, and glial cells. I'm going to focus on these glial cells because they are the support cells of the nervous system. They're sort of there to, if you haven't heard before, you got neurons, which are the star. They are the what allows electrical signals to travel within the body very, very quickly. Glial cells support those neurons. And there's a whole bunch of glial cells. So we've got epidimal cells. Those are in light pink. We've got astrocytes in green, right up here, sort of clinging on. Microglial cells in red. In the oligodendrocytes in light blue, right here. We're going to go into each. This is just sort of understand that they're interacting with each other and the neurons. The neurons are sort of these yellowish ones. All right? Don't worry. Each of them get their own slide. Life will be good. Those glial cells are going to surround the neuron and give it a support function. In the central nervous system, you've got astrocytes, microglial cells, epidimal cells, and oligodendrocytes. The astrocytes, they are these sort of greenish ones up here. They're star-shaped, and their job is to connect the blood supply to the neuron. Now, what is the blood carrying? And nutrients. Kind of important to get your neurons, these stars that allow for signals to get transported from one part of your body to the other very quickly, to get nutrients and oxygen. Because the neurons are not themselves directly anchored to the blood. So astrocytes deliver nutrients and oxygen. So far, so good? Microglial cells. They're basically, the central nervous system has its entirely own immune system. It provides an antibiotic response in the spinal fluid and throughout the nervous system. So these are red cells. Basically, they hunt down bad cells and get rid of them. They don't work terribly well against brain-eating amoebas, just so you know. Don't be terrified by them. They're terrifying. So microglial cells provide an immune response Astrocytes provide anchoring to the blood supply. Epidimal cells, they create what's called the cerebrospinal fluid. Your head, let's just talk about your head. It's got a brain in there, right? Hopefully. Your brain is not sitting in there in your skull devoid of anything around it. There's a liquid cushion surrounding it of cerebral fluid. Your spine also has spinal fluid through it. It acts as a cushion. The way I always think of it is, imagine if you're in a car accident. What happens to your body when you run into another car? Right, you slam forward maybe into the steering wheel, causing a lot of damage. Does that make sense? Like, you can at least picture it if you haven't been in a car accident. If you were to fall down without any of the cerebral spinal fluid, it'd be like being in a car accident without a seatbelt. Basically, your head hits the floor and your brain, because of inertia, slams against the front of your skull and gets damaged. You don't want that. Brain damage is bad. What the cerebrospinal fluid acts like is almost, it's better than an airbag. It's almost like if you were to take your car and fill it with Jell-O, and then you're in the Jell-O, and just go with me on this. You're in the Jell-O, and you slam your car into somebody else, you're not going to move as far forward because you've got that Jell-O cushion. And that's why I've been advocating for a Jell-O safety system in cars. It could work. So epidimal cells create that cerebrospinal fluid that acts as a cushion.
You mean other than airbags?
Look, Jell-O is way better than airbags.
Yeah, I know, but how would you create the compress?
What, the Jell-O?
Yeah, I understand it.
There are ways. You know, you have an endothermic reaction that cools it down really quickly. So it blows out because you can compress a liquid. And then it cools down, and there you go. Or you can use foam. Fill the car with foam. Foam would totally work, because I think foam and packing peanuts might be about the same, because you could use air from outside to pull it. There's all sorts of ways we can improve car safety with foam or Jell-O.
And foam can actually fail in the car at the same time.
See, now you got to patent that. You got something. Forget med school. Patent foam to save people in cars. Oligodendrocytes. Oligodendrocytes are sort of these bluish layers. What they do is they provide insulation. And by insulation, this is not thermal insulation. This is electrical insulation. They act almost like the, think of the, have you guys ever seen a wire? Wire's wrapped in plastic. You've got so you got copper on the inside usually. It's wrapped in plastic, and that prevents the signal from leaking out. The way a neuron works is it'll send an electrical cell down this long, what's called an axon. We're going to get into that in the next lecture. The Schwann cells, or the myelin sheaths, these oligodendrocytes, they are going to basically close that off. Think of this hallway, right? In order to get a signal from one end to the other, you have to run from point A to point B. If the doors are open along that route from that side to that side, you might be tempted to, I don't know, dart into a room by accident instead of going all the way to the end. What that sheath does is it closes the doors so that you're not distracted, you can go all the way to the end. So there we go. Astrocytes, what do they do? Point of an astrocyte. Anchors the neuron. What do oligodendrocytes do? They do myelination. They allow for insulation. What do glial cells do? They do provide many functions. Specifically, let's talk about microglial cells. They provide the immune response. See, so going through my head, we got the astrocytes, the glial cells, the Schwann cell. What? Epidimal? Yeah. The epidimal cells, what about them? Right, which acts like that foam that should be in cars, but isn't there yet until Carlos fixes that. Those are the cells of the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system has similar cells, but with different names, because welcome to biology, where two groups don't ever talk to each other and get on the same page before they publish. You have what are known as satellite cells and Schwann cells. Satellite cells are basically astrocytes. Their job is to support the neurons attaching to the blood supply. So satellite cells and astrocytes basically do the same thing. It's just satellite cells are in the peripheral nervous system, astrocytes are in the central nervous system. Schwann cells act like the oligodendrocytes. They provide that insulating sheath. So far, so good? And now you know all the glial cells. Yay! I can almost guarantee you if you were to take a test on this in my class, and it's like online or something, I'm going to make it matching. Yeah, I know, right? So far, so good. So we've figured out the differences between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. We've figured out all the glial cells that support the nervous system cells, the neurons. In the next lecture, we're going to get into all of these really specialized neurons and how they function.